What's going on, everybody? Welcome. Today is Tuesday. It is April the 4th, 2023. My name is Jeremy. This is my first cup. Who's here? I want to say good morning to Frank, Jenny, and Dennis. All the rest of you out there, no matter when you're watching or even if you're listening. I appreciate you coming by. Thanks for joining me for a cup of coffee or tea or whatever's in your cup or perhaps glass, mug, sports bottle. Doesn't really matter, because we're going to talk about martial arts. We're going to talk about our lives and how martial arts makes them better. That's really the heart of what we talk about here on this show. If you're new, welcome. Thanks for joining us. If you're not new, thanks for coming back. Good morning, Gad. I'm tired. I got to bed late. And I slept great until probably about 4 o'clock when I woke up and went, I didn't put the trash out. Now, of course, I had plenty of time to put the trash out when I woke up at 5, but I couldn't fall back asleep. I became obsessed with having to put out the trash. So 4:45, I got up and put out the trash. And then I went back to bed for about 45 minutes. Yeah, I'm tired. Got to bed at 10:30. Good morning, Nathan. Got to bed about 10:30. I was out teaching a self-defense seminar last night. It went great. I had a lot of fun. It reminded me how much I love teaching. I love teaching seminars. I love teaching that stuff, but I also love teaching people who have little to no experience with martial arts. And this was a fun sort of a thing. In fact, I did a little bit of Patreon content yesterday. If you're in Patreon, maybe you saw it, talking about the circumstances of how I ended up being asked to teach this self-defense class. But the heart of it is I had fun. The kids had fun. It was up at University of Vermont. We had 6. I was just thankful we had an even number. And we went through everything from awareness to escape. I taught some of my favorite things, which are what I would call non-injurious self-defense. You know, here's a great example, like when somebody grabs your wrist, you know, being able to press in on the thumb to get them to release. I wish I'd had more time. It was supposed to be 2 hours, hour and 40 in. The cleaning crew knocked on the door and they're like, your reservation was only until 7:30. We let you stay late. It's like, oh. And I looked at the person in the room who had organized the event. She's like, oops. She really didn't care. It was fine. So we had to quickly wrap up. There were plenty of things that I wanted to get to, but I gave them a lot of tools. You know, honestly, I don't think I could ever give them enough. Right? When I think about these young kids in their late teens, their early 20s, in, unfortunately, a small city that has a dramatically increasing amount of violence happening. The statistics on what's going on in Burlington are shocking. It is, over the last couple of years, it went from almost nothing to an absolutely shocking amount of violence. A car theft basically every day in a city of 60,000. More gun violence than we've seen the 10 years prior, you know, in less than a year. It's heavy. And then, you know, not to mention all the stuff that might happen on campus that I'm not going to put words to, but you know what I'm talking about. You could have given me 10 hours with them and I would have filled that time. Good morning, Rebecca. Good morning, Brian. And good morning, Liz. Gad says, great that you taught self-defense. Might even have inspired some of them to continue in the martial arts. Perhaps. Some of them have had a little bit. You could tell in the way they moved. But we had fun too. And I'm open to teaching more there, and they know that. And I think that's the longer term plan, is that I go up a few times a year and work with them, you know. Because even the stuff that we did last night needs repetition. The more repetition, the better they're going to do. So, I want to know about you. How was your Monday? What did you do? I had my first day in my new office. Got a lot done. Unfortunately, I share a wall with the one of either. Okay, it may not be the guy on the other side of the wall. It could be that it's the thinnest wall ever built, or he's one of the loudest people on the phone I've ever heard in my life. With my door shut, his door shut, it was hard. It was hard to stay focused. I had my earbuds in with some of my focus music on, just so I didn't have to listen to it. And, you know, it didn't ruin it, but I am thankful there's another office opening up in a couple months, that I am fairly certain I will switch into, just because of this. The wall in between, it's a newer wall. This is a really old building. And the room that I will move into, from what I can tell, both old walls on that. Whereas the room I'm in now was kind of, you know, newer construction. It's kind of cheap. So knock on wood that works out. Stopped by the gym, worked out a little bit myself. Still really sore for my workouts over the weekend, so I took it easy. And then kind of fun when I was asking all the kids, hey, anybody got any injuries we got to work around? One of them had some knee issues. And I said, hey, remind me after class. We could talk about your knee stuff. I used to have some knee stuff. Maybe I know some stuff that would be helpful. And he showed me everything that the PTs had him doing. And see, this is where I want to be really careful, because I have no professional experience as a physical therapist. There are really good PTs. There are others who are not. Sadly, I think this young man ended up with one who was not. Yeah, they were on the right track. But so I said, okay, hey, I'm not a doctor. Don't listen to anything I say. But this is what I would do. And I showed him some things, and it was very clear that within 5 seconds, oh, wow, look, you have terrible instability balancing on one leg. Let's fix that. Here are some exercises. How did I have those ready to go? How I was ready. I had, this is what we're going to do for this. Some of you will have to wait until later this week to know why. Frank says perhaps some noise canceling headphones would be helpful. That's why I had my headphones in. Yeah. I have a list going of the things that I want to bring into the office to leave there. And I may be purchasing another pair of headphones. We'll see. I have several, and we'll see what happens. But yeah. Gads has had a great Taekwondo training yesterday evening, practiced 3-step sparring, stances, and round kicks. I find 1-step and 3-step sparring interesting, but I'll be blunt. I think it is given too much priority at upper ranks in most schools. I think it's a wonderful training tool. It's a wonderful way to start to gauge distance and to develop some comfort with some free-form movement. But I think the at least in the way that I've always trained it and seen it trained. Now, there may be other ways of doing it that I'm unfamiliar with, but I think the benefits cap out really quickly. So I'll just throw that out there. Not a judgment of what you've done, Gad. Just something I was thinking about the other day. And really my head is wrapped in the self-defense world from last night. And the recognition that, let's face it, most traditional martial artists are not as prepared for a street confrontation as they think they are. I think that's a fair statement. I wonder if you all would agree with me. Their belief that they are is a wonderful benefit. It's something we talked about. There was that whole episode Andrew and I did, the myth of bad self-defense or something like that. It was a couple months ago. Controversial episode, controversial subject, but we articulated it well. You can go find it if you want. But I know this from traveling around and working with a lot of different people at a lot of different schools. I see that the moment you turn on a little bit of pressure, people fall apart, regardless of rank. I'm thinking of one school in particular where I turned up the juice a little bit, just a little bit. And I watched second and third degrees just crumble. It was bad. I was like, all right. I won't say any more about that other than this. And it's not because of that, but I'll never be invited to teach at that school again. And I'm fine with it. Nick says, we have 1-steps as part of our curriculum, and I have to teach them to prepare them for testing. My thought always go to, there's more emphasis on memorizing the 1-step than finding the value in what the 1-step teaches you about movement and position. Yep, that's kind of where I'm at. And Gad's on the same page, agreed. It's just a tool, just like sparring is a tool, but that has even become an Olympic event. Yep. Jenny says, I am terrified that I might not be prepared for a real life situation. My instructors say, I'll be fine. I know I would put up a good fight for sure. And that's all that matters as long as you fight. What's the only bad movement in self-defense? None. And fun fact, I asked these kids last night, I said, what's the only wrong choice? Because they were doing some things and they were messing it up. And I wasn't getting on them. I was just reminding, you got to keep your hands up. And a couple of them were getting a little defeated. And I said, what's the only wrong answer? And one of them thought, to just stand there? Yeah, just don't stand there. Anything else is better. They did great. Rebecca says, yesterday I went to my Kung Fu and Kempo classes, and for the first time I started to try break falling again, and despite being nervous, I did very well. I'm glad I tried. That's awesome. Human beings, I'm coming to believe, do our best when we are uncomfortable. Not terrified, but uncomfortable. Whether you approach it from a martial arts perspective or a business perspective or a parenting perspective or an athletic pursuit perspective, to be a little bit uncomfortable with what's going on, that's probably where the best outcomes come from. See, if it's in your comfort zone, if you're completely comfortable, you're not going to grow. It's not going to be better. It's not going to be different. In fact, you're probably going to phone it in because you can. If it's the other end of the spectrum, if it's too much, if it's terrifying, if it's your first day skiing and they try to put you out of a helicopter down one of those crazy jagged mountains that barely have any snow, that you can watch fun videos of those on YouTube if you want. That's also not a good idea. You'll probably die. Or you'll be so terrified you won't move, because if you move, you'll probably die, right? That's not good either. But what about when maybe you've been hesitating, you've been holding back a little bit? You could probably do more, and someone that knows you, your instructor, your coach, your parent, a friend that has experience in the thing that you're doing says, no, you're ready. You'll be fine. Let's do this. and they take you up to the slightly more advanced slope, or they spar with you just a little bit faster than you normally go. That's where great stuff happens. That's when you start to realize that the boundaries that you think you have are not where you've drawn them. And if you repeat that process over and over as you get better, do you even have boundaries? Steven says, to Jenny, if terrified inspires and catalyzes your training, it has done its job. If it fails to, you need to revise everything. As yes, we used to practice movement flowing from one stance to another distance, and also important, feel what it's like to block. Yeah. And that's where I see the value in 1-step or 3-step sparring. It's if you've taken seminars with me, we talk about safety. We talk about the feeling of safety, that if you do not feel safe, it's incredibly difficult for the mind to learn anything. And so you give people a safe environment to practice free-form technique, the responses at the end. You get them comfortable with stepping appropriately, blocking appropriately, and understanding all of those fundamentals. Man, I'm recording 4 episodes today. I'm definitely going back to bed after this to get another hour and a bit of sleep. Like everything, it has its place. But I do know schools that do not do free sparring. They only do 3-step sparring. I think that's a mistake. And that makes me sad. I think free-form sparring, free-form movement of all sorts, both offensive and defensive, are absolutely necessary to fully understand and be able to physically articulate the things that we learn. Someone's never going to be a good driver out in the real world if they're only ever on a track, or they're only ever in a parking lot. Doesn't mean that your first day driving, you go onto a really scary 4-lane highway. But maybe you got to get out of the driveway and make a few left turns and come home, right? Like, you got to start somewhere. Good morning, Kelly. Frank says that for him, this week will be an excellent week to practice being comfortable with discomfort. This week is just before Easter, so we'll be very busy at work. There we go. Let's see. We've got some quotes that Frank sent over, and let's take a look at those. I think those might send us in an interesting direction. And thank you, of course, as always, to Frank. And it means even more to me when he's in the chat to hear me thank him in person, sort of in person. We can call it in person. And Kelly says we also do kneeling sparring, all the kinds of sparring, all of them. They all have benefit. Again, you done a seminar with me, you know that we mix it up a lot. So thank you to Frank, thank you to Josh for our theme song, and thank you to Denise for the audio version of the show. Since Jenny went to the zoo recently, here are some zoo quotes. I'm very conflicted about zoos, and I'll tell you why after this quote. People forget the good that zoos do. If it weren't for zoos, we would have so many species that would be extinct today. And this is part of why I'm conflicted about zoos. So in a perfect world, all the animals would live where they are supposed to live. We would not have rhinos out of Africa, for example. But there are two things. One, it's the extinction. The fact that we as human beings have kind of screwed some stuff up and made it difficult for animals to survive and even thrive. And then there's another part that people don't often talk about. As a species, we really stink at caring about anything we don't experience. Think about all the conservation, all the animal preservation work that goes on. How much of it would we do if we had never been up close to, some of these wild animals in a zoo? It makes it more real. And maybe it wouldn't be a big deal for you. Maybe you just seeing a picture of an elephant, that's all you would need to care about elephants. That's not the way everyone works. And I would venture to say it's not the way most people work. When we teach self-defense, how do we get people on board? We talk about the realities. We try to get them to connect to what could happen to make it a little more real. We try to make the scenarios that we leverage in our training as realistic as we can, because then people will retain more. We need it to be real. A picture isn't necessarily real to people. Betty White. I really thought she was going to keep going. What are your thoughts on zoos? The greatness of a nation can be judged by the way its animals are treated. Mahatma Gandhi also said about the way a nation treats its prisoners. You can draw a lot of generalizations, but yes, also with animals. I think we do a pretty good job. For the animals that we like, Dennis Leary has a great bit about this. Goes back to the early 90s. The gist of it being, we only want to save the cute animals. The challenge here is that good treatment of an animal is entirely subjective. You could make an argument that eating an animal is really bad. You could also make an argument that eating an animal is good. I'm not going to tell you what to believe. But even if the animal is going to be consumed, there's variability in how it's treated. That's why free-range meat is a thing now. Because some people recognized, hey, while that cow's alive, maybe it should be able to be a cow instead of stuck in a barn. I don't know. You can decide for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm trying to remember. We've definitely pulled back on animal testing for cosmetics. I know that used to be much more common. I think these are good movements. Kelly says, I really like zoos or other animal parks that house animals that are injured and can't live in the wild. There are quite a few like that. We have a bird zoo here in Vermont that's based on that premise. About 20 to 30 minutes from where I grew up in Maine is the Maine Wildlife Park. And that's the whole premise of that facility. All the animals in Maine that you might imagine, somebody gets hit by a car and they need to be rehabilitated, or the parents get hit by a car or hunted and the young can't fend for themselves. And some of the animals never get to be released. They become too dependent on people. So they live their lives there. But I believe most, I'm not 100% on that, but a good portion do get returned wild. I was there a few years ago, I played North, and I was watching the mountain lions, and a family with two young kids came to watch them. big cage, glass plus a cage. I mean, there was no way you could put your hand in there and do something dumb. But the young boy was probably 3. That mountain lion did not take its eyes off him. It was kind of creepy just watching that kid. If that glass was not there, that kid was prey for sure. Kid didn't notice. I don't even think the parents did. Gad says, most zoos are all right. The animals look well taken care of and they have plenty of space to roam. But I've also visited zoos that actually made me cry for the animals there. They all looked emaciated and I suspect they were also abused. Yep. So there's another facility in Maine and I went once and I'm glad I went. And this is another, for me, sort of ethical dilemma. I forget the name of it, but I'm looking at a picture that I took there of a lion. Some of the animals that this place had been injured and they were caring for them. Some of them were retired circus animals. And from what I understood, it was a bit of a rescue. They were bringing in animals that nobody else wanted, that nobody else was going to take care of. They were not in the best conditions. This was a very rural sort of zoo. Old telephone poles were one of the major construction media. It's not the right word. The enclosures were small. The animals were old. But what do you do? Right? Is something better than nothing? Is euthanizing the animals the right choice? I don't know. I'm not going to say. I'm glad I went, but it was sad. And because of that, I don't know I would go again. Jenny says, the Philadelphia Zoo does a great job taking care of the animals. They are also great at educating the community at large about what needs to change to protect the animals. I've not been to the Philadelphia Zoo. I would like to go. Should be able to go to there's a nice zoo, not as large, my understanding, not as large as the Philadelphia Zoo, near Montreal. I've been once. Good size elephant enclosure. I like the elephants. I'll go back. One more quote. Zoo, an excellent place to study the habits of human beings. Evan Esser. I find it interesting that for some of us going to a zoo, experiencing a wild animal is almost a religious or spiritual experience. Right? The idea that we're connecting with that animal a little bit, even if it's one direction, can be powerful. And then you have other people that, I don't know if you've seen them, but unless the animal's doing something dramatic, they have no interest. Seeing a tiger laying there, we're like, it's not doing anything. It's a tiger. Have you ever been this close to a tiger before? Does that not mean anything to you? Or even worse, when you get the people who, if you remember early in the first Harry Potter movie, right? Tapping on the glass. I remember, it was a long time ago now, when I was in Galapagos, I watched some tourists getting a little close to a sea lion. If you've ever been near a sea lion in person, they're massive. They're huge. And No, they're not terribly graceful on land, but if they catch you, it's not going to be great. They've got teeth. I believe at some point evolutionarily, dogs and sea lions had a common ancestor. Because if you look at them, well, seals, sea lions aren't that far off. But they'll tear into you. And I was watching, and I thought I was going to see this probably early 20s tourist. He was with, I couldn't tell if it was his girlfriend or his sister, and somebody, one of their parents. There was 4 of them, and he was getting close, and he was messing with it, and it was telling him, back off. I'm watching, like, I'm going to watch this guy get torn up. It didn't happen, but it was close. Jenny's inviting me to the zoo. Well, you tell me when I'll be in town. And Dennis has a membership to the Bronx Zoo. Nice. So how do we bring this back? How do we tie this up to martial arts? We go, we experience something. It means something to us. Maybe we learn something from it. We could be really on the nose with it and observe the way animals move and see if there's any benefit for us in our martial arts training. Kind of the premise of some styles of Kung Fu. But I think there's something even more fundamental in there. What does it mean to be an animal? Is an animal still an animal if it's in a cage? What is the essence of being a tiger or a bird? You might have a different answer for that than I do, but once you find it, you can ask the same question of yourself. And you can ask that same question, not just of yourself in general, but yourself in specific. What does it mean for you to be a martial artist? What is martial arts to you? See, I come back to these questions all the time because I think they're so critically important. If you don't have your own definition for what martial arts is, and you don't have an understanding of why you are doing those things, how do you know if you're progressing? If the only way you're progressing or marking your progress is the color around your waist, over time, that leads to some problems. We've talked about that. But when you have an understanding of who you are and how you relate to your training, what martial arts means to you, you have plenty of opportunity to progress indefinitely. And I think that that's far more worthwhile. I hope you have a great day. I hope to see you soon. Tomorrow, maybe. I'm definitely going back to bed for a little bit. My brain's fuzzy. We'll see if I can get another 90 minutes of sleep or so. And wake back up refreshed. Fingers crossed. Thanks for coming by. Thanks for joining me. Remember, if you want to support, I put stuff on the family page yesterday. You can check that out. Whistlekick.com/family. You can join the Patreon because I put a bunch of stuff in there yesterday. And you can even make a purchase at whistlekick.com using the code FIRSTCUP15. All kinds of great stuff over there. We're constantly adding more. There's going to be another thing coming at the end of the week, the next monthly program. That'll roll out, I think it's Thursday or Friday. We'll see. So some of you who are kind of at the front edge of Flex, don't worry. I'm monitoring. Make sure that you can switch from one program right to the next. Regardless, thank you for coming by. I appreciate you all, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Peace.